guys. Charles, Joe, Stefan, uh, random people coming through. So this is a new for Matthew, right? This is your first vertical live.
This is my first vertical live. I'm not quite a virgin to doing lives, you might say.
No,
I've put my face
no.
on the internet before, but I have not done the YouTube Shorts version.
Oh, well, we're I'm special when it comes to YouTube shorts. So here's the deal. Here's what we're going to do. We're going to have some fun, um, because that's the kind of guys we are, fun guys. We're going to talk about this gym. I don't, I had to, I had to literally re-narrate my video, um, just because I thought people aren't going to get it. Gabriel, what's going on, man? Listen, let me ask you this on this. How long ago was this that you got this, Shady?
Okay. The Alpha Hunter, I want to say probably 15, 20 years ago is probably the ballpark time frame. Early aughts is my best guess. 2004, 2005, somewhere in there. And yeah, I've used it. Now it's a big EDC, right? So when I say EDC, there's usually a pocket knife that I can walk around with. But if I have cause to carry a fixed blade, I can get around it. I'm out and about in my yard. I'm camping. That was the go-to piece that I had. And for a very long time, I had knives that I lost all the time. So I was rather loath to spend much money on them because that they would come unclipped. I'd leave them somewhere at a campsite. They'd fall out of my pocket, if it was a pocket knife or something like that. So that was one of the first knives that I spent over $100 on, which at the time I think it was like $120 or something like that is what that
Really?
one cost. Uh, and I like it fit my big dumb hand. And in my ignorance, Scab, your video and my recent experience going to Blade Show and groping lots and lots and lots of knives, right? You can kind of have the best of both worlds, right? Like you can have a knife that doesn't twist in your hand, that like really feels rock solid. Like, if you're going to use it like an axe, even though that's not what you're supposed to do, that is not going to move around and you're really locked in to that knife, which that knife does. I thought that was like an endearing feature of the knife until like I held other good knives, because before, like a lot of the other, like the Buck 119 for example, it's not a bad handle, but it's squirrelier in your hand when your hand's wet than that one is. um and that was the only, or one of the few other like larger fixed blade knives that I had played with prior to that one, or that I spent a lot of time with.
Now, Big E, what's up? I know Gabriel's in. Donald might get in. Marco, guys, we're going to just kind of free talk and then we'll try to pop into the chat. I appreciate y'all coming. Here's the deal with this night because I did the video, and the truth is this. Here's the truth. The blade is serviceable, right? The blade actually has a really nice profile to it. But when I got done with the video, got done with the narration, got done with everything, you know, here's what I started thinking, and I don't know because I don't know who designed it. Um, but I thought, I wonder if the guy was a hunter who used gloves a lot. Because when I
Hmm.
put the glove on at the end of the video, it's a different knife. It's a totally different experience, you know. But the jimping's super aggressive, and so I just wondered if he made it for a gloved hand. And this is
Yeah,
not what I was expecting you to would have carried. It's really not.
yeah, that was part of the fun of sending it to you. You're like, all right. Yeah.
Well,
No, what attracted me about that knife Scab was the profile. So, as you could see, you didn't touch on my scabbard modifications, so to speak,
those were
which is
nice.
like, which was a shoelace. Um, but what that does is let me mount it horizontally,
Okay.
or carry it lower if I want. So, like you mentioned, the default tab is high up. If I wanted it to ride differently, then it let me do that vertically, but it also let me carry it horizontally. So most of the time, I would carry it right, under my gut or in around my back, depending on what I was wearing. But most of the time, if I had a coat, I would wear it like right in front of me, right on the belt buckle kind of thing, or I would wear it like on my chest or something, depending on the coat or something I was wearing. Um, and that was comfortable. I like the size. I like the drop tip. It felt really accurate to do whatever it is that I needed it to do. It's also a pretty durable knife. Like you can separate a hip bone on a moose with that thing if you want. So, like it did all the things I needed it to do, but it wasn't like this big giant Bowie knife. A lot of
Right.
people like hunt and camp with, or at least a lot of the people that I was around, had these, you know, giant apparatuses, and it was never fun to like use or do anything with. It just wasn't very dexterous. So that had like just about the right size uh, uh, blade on it for me to be a good all around kind of camp knife. I could eat with it. I could dress things with it. I could whittle with it, and like it felt comfortable for all that. It always, it held a an edge as long as you weren't trying to cut cables with it or wire or like a fence with it or something. Um, and it was really uncomfortable in a bare hand, but at the same time, like it locked in. So if you're whittling or something like that, or
Yeah.
if you're doing some sort of fine task, I didn't feel like I had to white knuckle the knife to like, and when I say that, I mean like really kind of hunker down and hold the knife secure to do these fidgety things. I didn't have to do that. So I thought it was comfortable from that standpoint. But in retrospect, because I don't carry it as often anymore, and when I revisited and did like a video a while ago, yeah, you're right. Like the grip is, if you're on a budget, which this was not an inexpensive knife, but it was not particularly expensive, and you find that knives twist in your hand, or that you have to really kind of like hold them down to the point that you get fatigued while you're doing whatever it is you happen to be doing, then that thing, just you hold it in your hand and it stays planted. It fills my palm up. I feel connected to it. It doesn't move around. In a glove, it doesn't. It's much more comfortable in a glove, but in the bare hand, it doesn't move around. And if you really want to lock in, like you could hold that jimping, but it absolutely will remove some skin from your
Well,
hands if you.
yeah, yeah. The size is perfect. It really is. And the truth is, like, since I've been doing a lot more of the outdoor stuff with Blackie Thomas and going over to all those guys, they're smaller knives. They're knives this size. You know, they're
Mhm.
functional knives. My the size is perfect. I like the way it rode. And the truth is, the more I thought about it, it does have a thicker handle through
Mhm.
here for grip. The one thing that's kind of crazy about this knife, I think it was last priced right at about 60 or $70. So it's one of those things that's dropped in price. Because when I looked it up, which I never do, but I thought I'm gonna look this up because I was curious what you would have spent on it.
Mhm.
There were two variants before it went out. One, and I'm assuming, is this the 420 high carbon?
Yeah, yeah, that's the 420. There was that. So they made that with a rosewood handle and a leather sheath, and then they made both variants with a gut hook as well. And I
Yeah,
didn't need the gut hook, so um, I ended up
yeah.
not doing that because I always use it as a pry bar, and that seemed like where they had put the gut hook on the model looked like it was a recipe to have my screwdriver fail.
Yeah, exactly. But I mean, the only thing that when I thought about it, and if it here's the other side, if my channel was a long term reaction channel like a lot of guys do, I know what's the guy Gideon's dude, and a lot of those guys will use knives for extended periods of time. It would have probably come out differently, to be honest. And I don't hate the knife. I hate this part of the knife, but I understand it when I see it. You know what I'm saying? Let's do this because what I know you have an SRK that you had
Mhm.
drifted to for a time. Is there a particular knife you have now that you carry more?
You know, yes. So the this is probably my mainstay. It's a folding knife. It's a Benchmade. What the hell? 154 CM. Is that the model number? I don't even know.
That's the
Benchmade
scale.
585. 585. There we go. So this Benchmades were not something that I really got into. I heard they were fine knives and whatnot, but somebody sold this to me, and this was one of the first pocket knives that I had that was also expensive. And the friend that sold it to me has since passed away, so it's on the sentimental side. But
Yeah.
I've carried this for a long time, and I managed not to lose it. I was pretty loath to spend over $100 on a pocket knife and then also lose it. But I've carried this one a lot. I've sharpened it a lot, and you notice the profile, right? Like it has more or less like that top. This profile of the blade is more or less the same as the Alpha Hunter that you have here.
Yeah.
It's a smaller version, but it's got a wider belly on it. It's got a drop tip, and it doesn't fit my hands as well, but it fits my sausage hands reasonably well if I want to do fiddly with stuff with it. That's what I carry most of the time. But because I review stuff on the internet, I've since been asked to review knives, and I was sent this one, which I've carried for a few months. I think you might have seen it. Joe talked about it. This is
Yes.
a fantasy themed dragon, very busy thing. And when it got sent to me, this was like $100 and something dollars. It's not an inexpensive knife, but for the amount of features it has, it's not bad either, right? Like it's laminated. I believe it's a Sanmai construction. It has elaborate fullers on it. It has a Damascusy pattern, which maybe will come out here. There we go. Um, it's got engraving and nice little bits of wood and whatnot, but it's in this. I don't know. Initially, it looked ridiculous to me,
Right.
but I thought I will give it a try. Right. So it's made by the folks at Mini Katana. They modeled it after a dragon. It's called the Silver Wing. And I was like, all right, but before I make a review, I'm gonna use it proper. And so I've carried it for a few months. And there are some things that I would change about it, but honestly, like it's pretty good. This little swoop on here is great for picking your fingernails, open boxes, prying at things. It's got a nice deep belly on it. All of this complex fullering, like really feels pretty good. The jimping is much more refined than is on the buck knife that you have. Like it holds my thumb steady, but it doesn't rip it's not exfoliating. So there's a lot of things that are really actually endearing about this knife, which I would not have expected if I did not carry it. Or I wouldn't have known that if I didn't actually carry it and use it like an EDC for a couple months.
Yeah. Megan says she hated your EDC knife, but she also wanted to know how your ass cancer was doing. Kent, how are you? Todd Carr, Kev, good seeing you. Steins, way to go. Himmler, what's
Megan,
up?
Megan
Appreciate
hated
it,
my
kid.
EDC.
Here's here's the deal. And I wanted to say this, Randy, what's going on? To everybody in the chat, man, we appreciate y'all. If I don't keep on with the conversation, I'm being nice. Here's the thing. I wanted to ask you too, how was your experience at Blade Show? I was curious about that.
In what regard?
And Bone, good to see you, buddy. I appreciate you. What did you think about it? That was your first one, right?
Yeah, it was fantastic. I could have absolutely stayed and done things much longer than I did. So bear in mind for those of you that are tuning in and may not know me super well, I have a day job and I had been putting off a trip to Atlanta for the better part of a decade. And so I said, well, you know, maybe I'll stop making excuses if I can go over the period of Blade Show. So the primary reason for me going to Atlanta was work, and the bulk of my days were spent doing that. But evenings freed up a little bit, and then I had Saturday to spend most of the time at Blade Show. And I could have absolutely just done Blade Show for 3 days. Even though I'm a sword guy, I could have absolutely spent every waking moment in the convention center looking at knives unequivocally. 3 days is not enough. And so certainly having less than that was also not enough. You meet people, you get in conversations, you start, you know, chit chatting about this, that, or the other, and then time evaporates and you've seen 6 things and it's been 8 hours. So time wise, my advice, what I would do differently is and I don't know if I'll get a chance to go next year, but I hope I get a chance to go again. I'm not sure how soon that'll be, but if I do it again, I would stay at the hotel in the convention center. Um, I stayed outside of the hotel, and the idea of being able to like go down and have a beer with the people there is really appealing because like it feels like a lot of conversations were unfinished, and then they're not guarding the table, and it's a little bit
Yeah.
more it's easier to have a conversation with folks when they're not necessarily on the clock, so to speak. So doing that, staying at the convention center would have been better. And then I wouldn't be like an old grouchy guy that's like, I don't want to get in my car and drive, pay for parking, and da. But if you're just have to go up the elevator to your room, it wouldn't be so bad. So that's one thing I would have stayed the whole time. That would be another thing I would change. And uh, yeah, other than that, like as a first timer, just there's so much stuff to see. I picked up very few knives, um, and it reminded me of going to Iceland. Like I love waterfalls and hiking and the scenery there. And I'm from a pretty flat state. Minnesota, where I live, has some rolling hills and whatnot, but it's covered by foliage, and really you can kind of see the tree closest to the highway. And going to Iceland, there's not a lot of trees. So you can see a really long way, like out to the ocean, all the way to the mountains. You have these lovely vistas, and there's usually like waterfalls and stuff like that. And so as you're driving down the highway in Iceland, you kind of get like burnt out seeing the most beautiful thing you've ever seen. What would normally be like an event and, a really scenic, beautiful place is just kind of a drainage ditch there. And so that's Blade Show. Like what would be the jewel of anyone's collection is just fodder. It's just some bullshit on a table, right? And there's 1,200 buoys in a row that you'd be count yourself privileged to own, but there's so many of them that it like the most beautiful thing becomes mundane, right? And it's really only like the kind of crazy divine stuff or swords that stands out. So there would be a few knives that kind of made me stop in my tracks, and I really looked at them. And they were things that I appreciated about swords. There was like really elaborate, detailed engravings, interesting, artistic, interpretations of a knife or ways of going about it. Just things that kind of push the realm of what you think a human is capable of doing with their hands. And those made me stop and ask a lot of questions. But there were a lot of them. There's no shortage of like $40,000 knives at Blade Show. So yeah, that was wonderful. And then there's lots of swords. I didn't get a chance to see them all either, but there are a lot of them there. And so for a sword guy, there was plenty of opportunity for me to spend time less than with knives, but still like a ton of really interesting stuff, and a lot of swords from people that I wouldn't have seen. And I made a video about it, but it gave me the impression that knife makers, when they make a sword, they make a big knife, and they make not always, because there are absolutely knife makers at Blade Show who made kick-ass swords, and they were excellent at both things. But the folks that do swords as like an extra, or as like an exercise to push themselves, or as a cool thing that crawled up their butt that they wanted to get done one day, those folks make big knives, and the swords are clumsy and not good swords. They might look pretty, and then they're often, a lot of them were finished like a really custom high-end knife. So all of these little attention to detail, all the like gapping and little things that you would hope from a really pristine knife were done. And just an incredible attention to detail, while simultaneously making these proportions that were ghastly and made it unwieldy and not good as a sword, right? With a knife, you can make a pretty chunky, clubbish knife, and it can still fit because it's small. You still feel pretty comfortable. Um, on the other hand, sword makers made tiny swords, and so their knives, by comparison, often looked shittier. They had like a crudeness and like a, just a lack of refinement that you wouldn't see or hope to see in some high-end knives. So some of the really high-end knife makers, like all the profiles are pristine, all of the lines are exact, everything is meticulously placed, all of the transitions between materials and media are all seamless, and everything is exactly the way that it's supposed to be in some of these higher end knives. Not always. If you ask them, like, "Hey, are there flaws here?" They'll point out every single little scratch on it. I mean, they're not perfect, but they're about as close to perfection as a human can come to. Um, Sword makers making knives don't do that. They skip all that bullshit. Like ripples in the surface of a sword are a little bit more okay. A little bit of a wandering line is a little bit more okay. Little bits of gapping in the wood are okay. There's a lot of forgiveness that you have in handmade swords, and or you seem to anyway in comparison to knives. And so these knives felt great in the hand. They had distal taper. That's where for knife folks, that's where um, the blade changes in thickness as it tape profiles down. So if I have this thing, there's the profile taper here, and then the distal taper would be this way. Like how much does it go from this thickness down to a thinner thickness? In swords, incredibly important facet. Not that every sword has it, but the vast majority of them do. And a really good sword maker is going to have a sword with distal taper in it, more than likely. And so all these little knives had distal taper and like bevels, and they felt really great in the hand. But then the finish level was kind of like a custom sword, as in quite a bit clumsier, less jewelry, right, and more like functional. Um, and so I thought it was funny that sword makers make baby swords and knife makers make big knives. Is kind of the impression I got. And there's a few that dabble in both and do both exceedingly well, but it seems a rare trait to be able to hit both.
Yeah. Well, the nuances of each come up. And Joe said, yeah, we next time we go, which I think we're going to go back in next year, 2025. Staying in the hotel is, I think that's key because we did the pit 2 nights. Yeah, we were there 2 nights. So we did the pit. And that was a lot of fun because you do get to see a lot of people. And you get to see a lot of people that you saw them at the table, like you said, but you get to see people that you get to know throughout the YouTube journey. Whether they subscribe or they have a channel or they do whatever. And so it's a much more laid back opportunity to do that. But it's also nicer uh, to be able to take an elevator down, have a couple of beers, and then take an elevator up, and you're safe and you're there because Atlanta's a madhouse anyway. We stayed maybe at 8, 9 miles away, and it took us 35, 40 minutes to get there every time. And it's like, and I grew up going through Atlanta. I actually did when I went last year. When we went, I had to go up to Chattanooga uh, first, and then come back, and it took me about 3 hours to get through Atlanta. And I thought, man, but next time we'll know. And the first time you're just kind of overwhelmed with everything, you know. Did you go on a Friday or a Saturday, or did you
I
go
went
both?
the like a couple hours on Friday after I wrapped up some work stuff, and then most of Saturday from like noon till my flight left, and Sunday I was gone. But for me, like to work that into a work trip was amazing.
Oh
Atlanta
yeah.
was also a great city. I really enjoyed the people, the food, everything was great. I had like a few just random moments with the citizenry of Atlanta, and they were humble and kind, and you know uh, just it seemed like really really great folks. I really enjoyed the city more than I expected to. The traffic is special. That's a way to put it. Uh, somebody said Atlanta is an hour away from Atlanta. Like everything is an hour away, and that seemed to be the truth. Like if you wanted to go 5 minutes away, it was an hour. If you wanted to go an hour away, it was an hour. Atlanta is an hour away from Atlanta, which
Yeah, and it's true. My parents lived just north of there for I don't know a decade, and we'd go up, man. And there are times, you'd go through Atlanta, going right through the middle of Atlanta, doing about 85, and if you go any slower, they'll run over you. But we had a good time. One thing that I found out that I didn't know, uh, there are guys who will show up. There are knife makers there who will show up. They put everything out on Friday morning, Thursday night, whatever, and by 9, 10 o'clock or 11 o'clock Friday morning, they're sold out and they're gone. Um,
Mhm.
I talked to a couple of people, a lot of your and there are a couple of guys who only took like one or two knives, but that made their trip. They're old school makers. They're in high demand. They went in, they literally sat down, or they did some kind of raffle, or they did whatever, and they were gone. We missed them. I couldn't tell. I could tell you about five booths we went to, but they just run. I wanted to go to the Miller Brothers thing because they make the big truck, thick, badass knives, but they make some swords which are just bigger, thicker knives, like you said. But I wanted to get by there.
I
We
had
couldn't
one.
get by there.
I had a Wakizashi from them, and a Miller Brothers 20. I can't remember. It was like their katana Wakizashi from very, very early on, and I hated it.
Yeah,
I could not wait to be rid of it.
yeah,
It was the embodiment of a crowbar, and it was so expensive. I mean, for me at the time, I think they've gone up in price quite a bit since then. But the thing was like $1,000. And as a camp machete axe, if you wanted something that was a katana that did the job of an axe, it was fine for that. But it just ripped my elbows apart using it. It was not fun at all. Very strong, sure, but also uh, not for me. But like a sword needs to move in a way. Like you have to be able to cut with it and like defend with it, and it needs to operate in a certain way. Not that everyone has to, right? There are purpose built tools for things. So if you are, uh, I don't know that it would be my first choice as like a executioner's sword. If there was just a stationary target that wasn't going to move or fight back, and you wanted to give one big, giant, powerful swing and have it do a job, like, okay, it would probably be okay for that. But it was also a stubby little fucker and like didn't have the length. So I don't know what it was useful for, but it wasn't anything I could figure out. So I was happy to see that blade go.
yeah. Well, I had one of their knives. I did one of their knives not long ago, and it was really, really good. But it's a knife, and that's
Yeah.
what it was made for. And it was a smaller thing. There's, the sword thing and the knife thing. They're two different worlds, and we talked about that often. And I think some guys do. I think there are times where some guys do try to stretch their bounds. Some guys try to challenge themselves, like you said, and some do okay. But a lot of times, what it is, I think, is they need to stay in their lane. You know, it
Yeah.
might be one of those situations where they're like, "Hey, I just want to do something different." Um, but
And
if it,
sometimes it comes out cool as fuck, right?
yeah,
So
yeah,
there are times, but uh, they are different. Somewhere along the way, though, there's like this loss of thought in a maker's mind. Because if you're some of the people that had really awesome knives and kind of mediocre swords had just incredible knives, right? Just buoys that were wonderful. And I would imagine that if you were going to make a fillet knife, that you wouldn't make a big fucking Bowie knife, right? You wouldn't say like I want to fillet a fish. Here's this monster truck of a knife, right? Now, it's not to say that sometimes combinations don't work. I don't remember what movie it was. Maybe it was the Thomas Crown Affair or something like that. There was this like Cobra that was made to do off-roading, and it was like a mixture of a truck but like a little sports car. And usually that mix is dumb, but in that movie
Yeah.
it was really awesome. So sometimes you can make a monster truck hot rod and it's awesome. Most of the time, though, it's an amalgamation that should never be done. And so if you have a particular vision in mind, it's entirely possible it'll come out and be great. But it strikes me as odd that knife makers that dabble in a number of different styles, you make a Bowie, you make a hunter, you make a camp knife, you make a pocket knife, you make something nimble and fiddly, something big and fighty. And then when it comes to making a sword, it like what was it for? Just never
Yeah.
like it didn't pop in your mind. In fairness, though, like I'm not saying I could do any better if I tried to make a knife once and it was awful. So I appreciate the struggle. I'm just saying, like, it seems like if there was just a little bit of a pause for, like, how should this feel? What am I trying to make? And if it's just whatever the fuck I want and whatever comes, all right. Um, but if you're trying to make like a katana, what what is a katana? What makes it special? If you're trying to make a long sword, or what kind of long sword? What was it for? Is it for fighting a person in armor? Is it for is it for something else? How are those swords supposed to feel? What are they supposed to do? And then hopefully your whatever you make like can do that and feels the way that it's supposed to. Um, yeah, and just that seems to be a miss. And instead they focus on making something that in silhouette looks like a sword and in finish work looks like a custom knife.
Yeah. Well, you sent this as well.
I did.
And I watched your video where you threw it at a tree 562 times. So the fact that it held up is incredible. Talk to me about this because
Sure.
I'll tell you this too before you do that. Talking about swords makers making knives and knife makers making swords, I think a lot can be said the same for reviewers. If you review a knife, you're going to review a sword the same way. And if you review a sword, you try to do, I think we fall into habits. I think we fall
Yeah.
into things that work for us that we try to fit into a box. And so when you do that, you get different takes, right? And it's
Hmm.
challenging. This was challenging. I enjoyed both. I did want to tell you that. And the fact that you actually used the damn knife, I like that. It came in scratched up and scarred. And Kevin, Peterbilt Knife Guy, wanted to know if this was the buck knife apology. He's such a buck knife fan. We started this conversation out for you guys coming in on this. I tell you what I wasn't going to do, and then we'll jump to the dagger because I had batoned a buck knife about a month ago and it broke when all the buckaroos come unhinged. But I thought I was not going to, but I knew that one meant something to you. But let's
It
jump
sure
to
did.
this thing. Let's jump to this thing because this was kind of cool. Um, and I think there's a lot of room here to do something with it if
Yeah.
you wanted to. You know, what was your take on this?
Um, it's a to me it's a lot of money for what you get. Now, basically, that's a baby sword, right? Like that is finished the same way Dark Sword Armory finishes their swords. Um, and do I have one over here? No, I don't. I have one somewhere. But if I look at a Dark Sword Armory sword, that is the crossguard is mounted the same way, the leather handle is wrapped the same way, the pommel is peened the same way, the fullering is done the same way, the edges are the same, and it's the reverse problem of well, no, it's not the reverse. It's the exact same problem that I talked to you about when a knife maker makes a sword. Sword maker made a knife, and it's basically a sword. And so, what is the dagger for? Well, you made a point about sharpness. I think you're right. I think this is primarily like an armor fighting knife, but historically, a person probably would have used it to cut their food and do other utility based tasks, and it should be sharper than what it is. And that's a problem that Dark Sword Armory has with their swords, and so that problem translated to their knives. Their swords don't come super sharp. In fairness, this is not a problem unique to Dark Sword Armory. There are a number of sword manufacturers that put a kind of big obtuse secondary bevel on the edge, and leave it to the owner to refine it if they want. But considering that a number of swords were made to like fight people in armor, and potentially may want a more robust, forgiving edge that's going to hold up to hacking. Not all. There's certainly an argument and a school of thought that all swords would have been extraordinarily sharp and had a very keen shaving edge on them. But anyway, the point is, I agree with your assessment that that should have been sharper. It was sharp like their swords are, and that's not sufficient for a knife. I also think that like the refinement that you get on there for $230-$40 didn't seem to be great, because there's so many really good options for knives in this price point, right? Like there's a ton of makers that put out not necessarily daggers like that, but a lot of $200 in the knife world can get you a lot. There's a ton of very good options, and I would rather have my SRK than that.
Yeah.
Maybe not
Well,
if I was fighting somebody with a sword, but
yeah, I mean, and knives are purpose driven. Charles, appreciate you joining us, buddy. The thing is this, if I looked at it and if you said $240, it's got to be sharp. I don't give a shit what it is because I can do this, which is about the same price point, I believe, and it's sharp. You know
yep,
what I'm saying? Two totally different things. But I'm just saying for the price point, this comes razor sharp. But I understood that it's a finisher, right? This would be more of a finisher. But I just when I look at it and when I review things, I look at it like this. This is the only knife I'm looking at. So if this is the only thing I had on me, what can it do? Does that make sense? And I'm not talking about even in a survival point, but to be fair to the blade, to be fair to what I'm reviewing, to be fair to the company, because we could do the comparison thing a million times and there would never be a need to have a review channel, you know? So I look at it like that and I thought, well, it'll stab the shit out of you. It'll do that. I like the
it
way
will.
these things stuck. It threw pretty good, but I just thought for that for that amount of money. And I wanted to talk to you some about that too during this thing was, the difference in pricing and swords and knives and what you get for each and that kind of thing. Because it's funny, there's a disparity. Um, Not a disparity. There's like, if you review a $200 sword, well, that's not an expensive sword. That's not, right?
Mm-hmm.
That's kind of start off type stuff, right?
Yep, yep. That's
And
towards
now,
the entry.
and we're getting into a day and age and a time where $200 won't get you a lot of knife anymore. Where there was a time where it was a higher end, but I mean that's a different topic. But the truth is, on like something like this, right? When you say it's a baby sword, do you have that limits this then, right?
Yeah, I mean it's finished like a baby sword, and it's made the same way. It's just a smaller version of what that company produces. Um, when I say that, like, what other alternatives could there be? Well, you probably didn't have to make a wood core and then wrap the handle in leather. It doesn't need to be there. It could be finished any number of ways, but it didn't need to be finished the same way a sword handle did. The pommel, it's not uncommon for a dagger like that to be done. The gap in the crossguard, I don't know. There's a ton of little things on there that I think are less acceptable in the knife world. And if you held up your other example, or I mean, if I let me find some nonsense piece over here that I have. There's I don't know. Get a good view of my bald spot here. The like this is the SRK. It's not going to do the same thing, but this is
Right.
I want to say probably around the same ballpark, depending on where you find it and what version, right? Now, it doesn't have the quillins to protect your hand, so if you wanted something that offered the functionality of that dagger, this would not be a direct replacement. But I mean, like little things, the ergonomics of this knife and how it fits and rests in my hand is superior to that. That's supposed to be a historical piece, so I can't really dig against it. But little things about like how, there's this grip is a simple piece of rubber, but there's like no gaps or holes or anything like that showing. Everything is kind of where it's supposed to be, and on that you can look at the handle and find a you know a significant number of imperfections, so to speak, indications of handmadeness, a rough and tumbleness that I don't particularly welcome in a knife. And I think a lot of sword makers seem to do that. Um, there was a knife from Lance Connect Emporium that I reviewed a while ago, a fixed blade. It's like a farmer kind of camp knife. Um, it didn't have the same kind of hand protection that knife did, but it had it was 200 and something dollars and had a lot of imperfections as well. And as I was walking around Blade Show, like a lot of that is not acceptable. You wouldn't see that on a $200 factory made knife, but you probably couldn't find a custom made knife for $200. I mean, a lot of those are significantly more expensive.
The Yeah, no, well, and the thing is this I don't know that this is handmade, right? This would be cut out. This is probably cut out. Joe, get rid of that fucking guy, please.
It
This is cut
it's
out. I mean, this is like a water jetted type deal, right?
hmm I it's a matter of contention, I guess I'll say. Supposedly they're handmade in Canada, but there's a fair amount of disbelief about that.
These are handmade.
Supposedly, I imagine there's some power tools involved. They're not like forged out and then done with only hand tools, but supposedly those are handmade items. Yeah,
I think
right.
they lying on that one. They may not be. They may not be. I was not expecting handmade. You know what I'm saying?
hmm
That's not exactly what I was at all. I thought they were like made in China, to be honest with you. You know what I'm saying? But
Well,
because
there's a fair
handmade,
number of
I
people
mean,
that do think that.
what is it?
I said there's a fair amount of speculation that Dark Sword Armory makes their products outside of China or outside of Canada, and that they're either made in China or in India, and then some level of assembly happens in Canada. But they're advertised as handmade in Canada and wholly made in Canada.
Okay, okay. I didn't know that. I had no idea. Which I still don't know
But
that I believe. But I mean, whatever.
I think at best they'd probably be small batches, though.
Yeah,
Obviously, like they're casting the fittings, they're casting the handle. They have like a process to do it. So it's not handmade in the sense that like a one off, like a blacksmith who makes knives, a knife maker would make it. It's not the same as that. There's probably more of a kind of an assembly line kind of thing happening in the manufacture, but supposedly hand forged or ground out and made in Canada.
yeah, yeah. And it is flowers and thorns. So it's still a nice piece. Yeah, there's nothing wrong with it. I'm not saying that, but when you start into a hand when you throw the words hand forged into anything, it's a
hmm
different, it's a different deal. It just is. But it would make sense, I guess, in because I was wondering why it was $230. And that's not that it's super duper expensive for what it is. It's the difference, I guess, in pricing. You know what I'm saying? So I know
Yep.
there's a couple of guys, and we'll talk about some different knives, some different things like these guys. This is Geotech. These guys are from Spain. This is one of my favorite. You might like this one, Matt. This is
I
kind of
would
one,
like that. Yeah.
but they do this whole thing and they do a leather sheath and they do the whole. I'll tell you one thing that I absolutely adore. They do the whole damn thing. I think it's $120, something like that. That I mean, and that's now I'm not saying it's hand forward, but it's hand finish, with the edge and the whole thing. This thing, for those of y'all looking at Geotech, but I'll tell you what they do that I love. You see this right here? I hate straps. They took the time to put a little extra leather right there where you can just tuck this bastard right here. I don't know. I'm easily impressed, but that just because do you know how many of these I cut off a week on accident? That's like when somebody sends me a knife, I'm like, holy shit. But I love this thing. Now, which one were you showing me?
This was my first custom knife. It's a knife made by somebody by a gentleman named Ed Martin in Texas, I believe. Um, and this is my favorite style of knife right here. You can kind of see that this is the probably what I was looking for in the Alpha Hunter. Just a drop tip. It's got a
Yeah.
belly on it, but I went with the exaggerated version when I was younger. But this is a very simple knife, but just there's an appreciation that I got with this knife. It was my first custom knife, and I got it in a custom knife, meaning like handmade by a competent knife maker, by a person who makes knives, and that's what they do professionally. And they were good at making these kind of bushcraft knives, and that was a specialty. So that's what I mean by like a custom knife.
Yeah.
Um, so I got this in like a trade with swords, and me and this guy were haggling on a pile of stuff, and we just couldn't quite get where we needed to go. So this got thrown in the mix, and I was like, all right, I'll take a chance on it. Looks like a cool knife. And when I got it, just it melts in my hand, but it doesn't turn, it doesn't move. Um, the thing that I liked about the Alpha Hunter and that like it feels stable in my hand is is possible on this one. It fits my big dumb sausage fingers, but it doesn't have any of the discomfort. And it's got little swells that like fit my thumb and give you just enough, but don't at the same time rip your skin off at the same time. So
Who
this
now?
is
Who made that?
Ed Martin.
Ed Martin.
Yep,
I'll
it's
have to
from
look
Martin
him up.
Knives.
I'll have to look him. There's some good guys in Texas. There's William Collins. He does a little different stuff, but there's some really good makers up there. As a matter of fact, I got all my right here. This guy's out of Texas, but he does a little bit different. He does a lot more bushcraft specialty. Like he'll have, like you may have two different grinds on it. He does a lot of what do they call that? I'm drawing a blank. Anyway, there might be two different grinds on the knife, but you can sharpen the entire knife the same way, and they're specific for hunting, camping, etc. And he's out of Texas. I'm a big fan of his. There's some good guys. I mean, there's guys all the way around that do a good
Yeah,
job. They really do. How many knives do you have, if you had to guess?
I don't know, 100.
How many swords?
Oh, that's in the hundreds. Um,
Well,
yeah. So with knives, they're smaller, so they're a little easier to manage. And to me, though, knives are I don't collect them the same way, and so there's that's not entirely true. I end up with like a lot of little pocket knives and things like this, uh, because I lose them and then I find them, and so I've gradually ended up with more than I want to. But fundamentally, I think of them as tools, and I seldom keep them around just because I like them. There's usually some sort of purpose behind why I have them, or at least I like to think there is. I can't say that and have 100 of them, but that's I don't collect them. I don't have like safe queens. I don't have knives
yeah.
that I don't. It's not true. I'm loath to use the Ed Martin knife. It's my favorite feeling, but it's also like $500, and so I'm not super keen on like
Right.
camping with a $500 knife. But I have. So, um, But yeah, there's just I use the knives that I have, and I don't collect them just as art objects the way that I do with a sword. I have swords that I don't use, that I just enjoy and study and look at, but I don't have knives generally that I do the same thing with. So I have them, but they're usually fixed blades or something similar to a drop tip pocket knife, and I carry them and I use them for all the things. I carry a knife every day, but like I go to the box and I grab one. If I lose it, then c'est la vie. Oh, it looks nice. Yeah, nice little drop
Oh,
tip.
this one's dropping this week. It's the Snook. The thing I was going to say is most of the guys that make the knives, like that Ed Martin, they make them for you to use.
Hmm.
I've run into guys who just won't use an expensive knife, but that's what they honestly like. Bill Harsey, who is a world renowned knife designer, pocket knives especially, but for everything. But I had talked to him not long ago, and his Spartan Harsey folder is about a $500 pocket knife. And he said, "Man, I made it as a user. I never made it to be a safe queen. I never designed it to be. And it's a workhorse of a knife." And he said, "I love when people send me pictures of theirs and they're pristine." He said, "But they were designed to use, hard use." So, but I get it
Yeah,
because I've got some too that I'll
it's
never use.
it's a balance. So I have to note that like I'm into this knife hundreds of dollars, right? So I don't, and I like it, and I'm kind of nervous I'll screw it up, and I don't. It's also like quite a unit, this whole package. I don't need a fucking fire starter on my belt. I don't need a sharpener. Like I don't, and I this is kind of a more than I need personally.
Right,
If I camp, I more or less glamp. I don't need a fire starter. When I camp, I bring a plumbing torch with me to start fires. I don't want to fuck around. I'm not trying to test my skill. I just
right,
want everyone to leave me the fuck alone and go to bed most of the time. So I don't. I'll start it with a gallon of gasoline if I need to. I'm not.
right.
I'm not,
My
not
kind
trying
of
to
camping.
connect with my ancestors or anything. But at the same time, I have a chef knife upstairs that's become a new favorite of mine. And the value on that chef knife would probably be around $1,200. And that chef knife is made from swords I broke on YouTube doing reviews. And so I
Nice.
sent those broken pieces to Mike Curley. He's a Forged and Fire champion. I'd encourage you to check him out at Seventh Dragon Knife Works. He makes chef knives primarily. That's his area of specialty. I sent him some broken swords and said it'd be kind of cool if you made some shit out of this. He made I think my favorite knife is one that he made. It's a chef knife made from things at my grandma's house. And when she passed away, she was the matriarch of the family, and everyone would go over there on Sundays, bring the families, and we'd all have breakfast together. And it'd kind of roll into a leisurely Sunday brunch, and we'd spend it with grandma. And when she passed away, most of that stopped, and her house was old. And when it got sold, it was going to get torn down. And I wanted something to remember those times, right? So Mike took some stuff from my grandma's house that was made of carbon steel and made a chef knife. And all of the people around me that don't need anything, they have, they're the people hard to buy gifts for because they can get whatever they want themselves. Everyone kind of wants to take a turn with that knife. Everyone wants to borrow it. It makes them feel close to grandma. It reminds them of better days. And there's so many knives that have all these features and like this steel and that one. And no matter what, if you cut on the granite countertop, it's gonna get fucking dull.
Yeah.
There's only so many times you can cut butter with it right into the steel or the plate before it's not that big a difference, I guess is my point. Um, and it pales at least in comparison to the sentimentality and the kind of
Right.
uh, the more than the sum of its parts kind of value that knife brings. And people in my family like will spend time with that knife, have it for a few weeks, remember grandma, and it's a special kind of thing. So that's something unique and special and probably my favorite. But he also made this knife out of garbage from swords I broke, and so it
That's
was like,
cool.
all right. And he filmed the process and made a video about it. and it's a pretty honking big chef knife, but it's made all of it is only the handle, everything is just made from swords I broke on YouTube. And to me, that's so fucking cool that it's a sword made of, or it's a chef knife that I can cook with, made of broken swords.
Dude,
Um,
that's dope. That's badass.
it's it's awesome. And so I
Yeah.
use that all the time. That is my favorite thing. If it were a little smaller, I would use it to cut my steak when I eat, but it's a little too big for that. But if I need a chef knife, that's what I break out. It tickles me every time because like I look at it, I just look at it, I'm like, yeah. And it's made of like stuff I remember breaking too. So it
That's cool.
I don't know.
The grandma thing is cool. I'm going to tell
Hmm.
you, especially Southern boys love grandmas. That would be dope, man. That's a good way to remember. Casey Spire, welcome in, man. Glad y'all are all here. Sorry, guys, we've been chatting. Um, yeah, dude, that's badass. That I mean, things like that resonate with me. I'm just gonna be honest with you because I've got the war room, and most people only see this part, but I've got my grandparents on the wall over here. I've got a mirror, an old USMC mirror uh, from a great uncle. I have his my great uncle that was in the Marines, was in the Philippines in the Banana Wars. I have his son's little Bible over here. He was killed in Korea. So those kind of things, that really resonates, and it's cool that people can do. That's a skill set, man.
It is, but it dawns on me that like to me that is so much more powerful in a knife than
Oh yeah,
what steel it's made out of, or
yeah,
like I say that not that like some of the modern cool steels can't do interesting things, but if you take like very simple 1095 1060 and heat treat it well, it's going to work pretty well as a knife, right? It's not going to be super special. There's probably some more mileage that you'd get out of it doing other things, or if you had schmancy steels or some sort of thing heat treated well. But fundamentally, like you're going to have to sharpen it. It'll diminish. It's not. I don't know. It doesn't seem like that big and big a shift to get like a reasonably well heated heat treated knife made out of 1060 and whatever bougie steel is out today. But the feeling I get cooking with my grandma is just I don't know. That's a lot more powerful. I take that. I take that any. I'd rather sharpen it a little bit more frequently and have that connection than not. And
absolutely.
so I think there's a ton of stuff that people could do, and it's a missed. I don't know. It's a missed thing today in knives because what I see is I see at like Blade Show. There's a lot of uh, like I took this special material, this like bone, this stone, this swanky type of steel, this complex process to make a neat pattern. But like there's fewer things like I've made this out of nails from my grandma's house, right? And I don't know, like to me that seems like something special. Incidentally, I found that for family that doesn't give two shits about knives, if you take a matriarch, a patriarch of a family, and you make a knife that you can cook dinner with your family, or a fork, or I don't know, just some utensil that you're going to use regularly, and you make it out of shit that they used, that's a very powerful uh, thing. That's a really meaningful gift, and I could absolutely see spending $1,200 on a chef knife, or whatever it is that you happen to use, because it's just that's something that you keep forever and you cherish every time you pick it up.
Yeah,
If you're a
absolutely.
big softie, if you're a big softie like me, if you
Well, I mean, yeah, but that's my wife has Meg has my grandmother's frying pan, and we use that a lot. And it's about 100 pounds. That's why she stays in good shape. But it's Gerd's welcome in. Those things matter, and those things, and I'll be honest with you, at least on the knife side of the community, it's things like that that help bring people together as well. There's community, and there's chats, and there's lives, and there's all those things. But there's a lot of sentimentality in it. Just again, looking around the room, if it's I've got some of my grandfather's knives, I've got that. I think it's good. And I think it brings us together. And it doesn't have to be super still, and it doesn't have to be, you know, it's just, I was looking at this knife. This is from one of the oldest knife makers or running knife companies in America. And I had a brain fart as soon as I said that, but it's the Green Russell Green River Works. I think they were started in the early 1800s. It's 1095 steel. You can buy the blanks, put the handles on them. You can do all that. But it's if I show this or if I do a video on this, I'll get a ton of comments. Man, my granddaddy had that, or my dad had that, or my dad, you know, that's there's just something dope about it. There really, really is.
There's all kinds of different connection points, and like buying the same knife that your grandfather used, there's a connection point. I don't know. There's something special though of like the place that I had Thanksgiving and Christmas. A
Yeah,
place you can't go home, right?
right.
Um, ha- from a house that was going to be torn down, and like pulling old crap out of that house and like having a knife made from it is just it's particularly special because that house is gone, right? Like
Yeah,
you can't drive by it anymore.
yeah.
It's been torn down, and a new place has been put up for a new family to make memories. But uh, all of
Now,
us can't go home, right?
how did
So,
you come up? Did you come up with that thought? Is that just something that popped in your head? How did that idea happen?
well, Mike is a guy who has practiced and done some stuff on Forged in Fire, and like when he was initially kind of taking over knife making and stuff. I can't remember exactly how it was, but somehow I ended up sending him broken sword parts so that he could practice forging stuff into knives again. I'm sure he had no shortage of junk, but like old saw blades and this and that, I would send to Mike, and he would make things out of them and repurpose and put new life into them. Um, And I think when my grandma passed away, I'd asked him like, "Can you make something out of these? Could you make a knife?" And he said, "Yeah." Like it didn't, yeah, yeah, of course I can. Is it carbon steel? Then sure. Love making stuff out of trash. So it kind of started that way. And I don't think it was a knife that he was particularly happy about, right? Like, but garbage in, garbage out kind of thing. It's not the best knife by any stretch of the imagination, but it's also the most special knife, right?
Yeah,
I think to anyone, you know, most people you'd see the knife, especially since it's like made of carbon steel and it rusts easy, and like you'd see it and probably, uh, I don't know, you probably wouldn't pay $10 for it at the Goodwill, but it's priceless to me, right?
absolutely. No, those, dude. That whole concept. Because who would even think to do that? That whole concept, and like you said, to pass it around to cousins or aunts or whoever.
Yeah, whoever's missing grandma,
Yeah, that's absolutely kick ass, man. Now you've given me an idea. I have, and the reason I mentioned that, I have my mother's grandparents' home still stands in North Carolina. We don't know for how much longer. We call it the old home place, and my uncle had redone it, brought it up to speed. He's gone. So I don't know how long, but that gives me some ideas because when that's gone, you're not replacing that. That's over 100 and something years of history. Same thing. Family
yeah,
reunions, all that. It's just crazy. Crazy. I love that idea, man.
yeah. There,
God,
there's I don't know how spiritual how you get about that kind of stuff, but I don't know if it's like the energy of the place, all the positive memories. To me, uh, there's like a connection, a feeling that I get when I cook with it. It just reminds me of grandma, puts me in a good mental place. That's it. But to other folks, they think of it as, their childhood energy and all the nails in that home, right? And like that gets to come with you. So I don't know. It touches people in that think differently in different ways, but I agree that it's a cool idea, and I think there's honestly like a good way to have the best of both worlds, right? uh, you can have a blade made out of whatever super steel you like, because I know knife people in particular seem very have a hard on for whatever steel type is in the knife. It's a major factor in purchasing, and
Eh,
you
some
can do
do.
that. Some
Yeah.
do. Some people have a hard on for the steel type, so you can get a knife made out of whatever zhuzhy super stuff you want, but then get the various hilt components made out of home. You can have handles made out of, have the scales made out of, I don't like, I wish I had saved the wood from the den or the ceiling or something like that. I don't know. There's a lot of things that you can do to incorporate those into something. If you look at it and you're like, listen, I have no desire to have any kind of knife made out of old nails from my grandma's house. That sounds like a shitty knife. Well, get your super steel, but then take something that, is special to you about that place and use it in the scales or the cross guard, or as an inlay or whatever else.
Yeah. No, I did. I absolutely adore the idea. Kathleen, congratulations. I'll be a great grandma. It probably means more to them than you know, or that they want to make mention. I can tell you there are things, if I would have had any inkling when my grandmother died, I'd have done the same thing. Um, I think sometimes in what Kathleen's saying or thinking, and I just answering it, I think we maybe not take advantage, but we don't think about it. You're alive, you're here, we're enjoying the moment. And then when it's gone, it's like, oh shit, that kind of thing. Um,
Hmm.
yeah, you can ask a question, Ella. If we see it, we'll get it, man. We've just been shooting shit back and forth, man. And if you're in the chat, thank you. We've been going for over an hour. Matt's a talker. What can you do? But, and so am I. So, yeah, Ella, ask the question. And no, I don't have an OnlyFans. Let me go ahead and check that out. I've been looking into that, especially since I've been losing weight. But you know what I enjoy
Scabby
about
foot
the chat?
pics.
I enjoy the people that just swing through to ask me about my eye. Like I don't know that it's sitting over here half the time. Like I'm not aware of that. That always just thrills me to no end. But please start what? Please start one, Scout. Start what, Steins? Oh, and no, I think
Yep.
we're good. So here's the thing. Parents still have it was my first sword. Oh, I've done that. The truth is with knives and with swords and with things like that, I always enjoy having you on because it makes me kind of laugh. The things that you don't find interest in a knife, you know, um, some of it I do, some of it I don't. Your take on knives is always interesting to me, but it's not much different than from when I go camping, like with the crew with Blackie and those guys. There are so many different communities, whether it's sword or bushcraft or camping or whatever, and everybody has a different take. Or I like a little if it's sharp and pointy, dude, I like it. I don't care. I've learned a lot from you and from Joe on swords because a lot of times, like you were speaking earlier in this conversation, um, about what's the sword for. Well, I would have never thought that. It's for cutting you.
Hmm.
And I'm not trying to be smart, it's for stabbing you. But when you do that, when you start thinking about it, it does give me a different appreciation, for what the sword might have been used for or something like that. So that's cool. I always enjoy your take. I always find it somewhat humorous because I know you've pissed somebody off. Kev,
Yeah,
that makes
just a few
me,
people.
yeah, that's what start start on call it older fans. Yeah, that's what we need. But it
Yeah.
always it trips me out. I don't give a shit about steel. I really don't. Um, if it's heat treated well, if it holds an edge, if it stays sharp, that's what I like. If it's easy to sharpen, that's something that I like too. And sometimes with the super steels, it takes more time and it's not easy. I like 1095. I like 5160. I like the stuff that's easy to sharpen. You know what I'm saying? That kind
Hmm.
of thing. What do you got coming up? I know we've been talking a while. And I don't want to prolong it, but what do you got coming up on the review front?
Oodles. Eventually, I will I will get to reviewing the Dragon Wing for all of those people that are super
Do
interested. And I've
that
honestly thought about uh,
again.
reviewing more knives, but I would do them sparingly after I've carried them for, you know, a few months at a time. You've seen this lovely guy. So I will review that eventually, but mostly swords, Gab. I have some katana from Shadow Dancer. There's all of the ones on the wall behind me are actually made by Shadow Dancer. They sent me a pile of them, um, and I have a few to get through. I have some European swords from Windlass, from Swordier, from Hanbon, from a number of other manufacturers. I don't know. I did a video the other day where I said I have so many review samples that I need to. People are waiting on me. I should just do a video where I give you some quick thoughts. Like if you want to know thumbs up or thumbs down, just kind of quick hits. And I did, and I didn't finish. I talked for an hour and a half, and I couldn't get through, you know, the.
Yeah.
But I have like 100 different swords that I have to review yet in samples and things like that. So there's a lot of them. I'm not complaining. It's a great problem to have. But yeah, lots of swords, lots of different kind of things. I have a bronze um, Jian to talk about. I haven't used a bronze sword before, so that's interesting and different for me. Um, but yeah, lots of swords. How about yourself?
I got some. I'm going to read this out loud to guys in the chat. Allah, Bala. So, my question is what brand would you recommend for budget knives, machetes, swords, and so on? Something that will last and wouldn't let you down as well. What's your take on Condor? Here's my take on Condor. I'll answer that really quick. I think I think they make some great stuff. I think that a lot of times I love that. I've got mine. Matter of fact, I'm a big Condor fan. With Condor,
Cheers.
You got to get one of these. With Condor, you might have to do some edge work. You might have to sharpen it up. I know that Kev, Peterbilt knife guy, just did the Wood Buster. I like Condor. I just think if you know going in, Todd Carr, I was going to say Cold Steel, um, Condor, Cold Steel. I seen someone mention Effingro. I don't have personal experience with them, but I've heard they're good. Man, there's a lot of budget. And look at some of the traditional. You mentioned machetes. Look up Tramontina. There's nothing wrong. I love Tramontina BPS knives. We could do a whole show on that. The budget sword thing, and I wanted to touch on this a little bit, and we may save this for a blade talk. But just in terms of like budget swords, that's a whole, because you might spend $300 or $400 on a sword and it'd be like, okay. You know what I'm saying? And Joe asked you a question.
I did not get that at Blade Show, Joe. I've had the moonshiner
Good
for
night,
a hot
Joe.
minute.
You got what?
Joe asked if I got that at Blade Show. I did not. I did not get the moonshiner at Blade Show. The Condor knife that I have, it's one that I've had for a while. I didn't get anything at Blade Show, but I have like I said, I've got piles of knives over here.
That I was interested to see. Show your bag if you can. I was interested to see the bag.
Some stuff that's come out of it. Here's my knife collection bag.
That and
Stuff.
everybody needs one of those.
Yeah, gotta have a bag.
I love the moonshiner, dude. I'm a huge. I think Joe Flowers did that. Um, no, actually, I got it as Is that chef knife on TV?
I don't know. This is the Cooking Guild.
Okay.
A cousin of mine passed away and had an interest in knives, and when he did, his family was like, "Hey, you're the knife nut. Take this stuff." Uh,
There you go.
yeah. Which, incidentally, when you talk about sentimental stuff, I had a cousin that passed away. Uh, his daughter, he was a single dad, and so his daughter is now being raised by his sister. Um, and unfortunately, he took an interest in knife smithing before he passed away, and he had bought this Irish hammer, a bronze hammer, to like start forging knives, traditional Irish way. And unfortunately, he passed away before he ever got a chance to really do it. But I've thought about, I can't make a knife with it, but I've thought about sending the hammer because it's her dad's hammer to make a knife for his daughter. I thought that that would be, I
Oh,
don't know,
that would
like
be
little
cool.
little things like that make it special, right? Like I'll call Mike again and say like, "Hey, how do you feel about me sending you a hammer to make a knife, but you got to use this hammer?" Like, I don't know. Some people like the extra hurdles and stuff, but anyway, that's one of
That
those
would be
things that I thought
cool.
would be special.
That would be cool. Ooh, a little
Yeah,
dagger.
yeah. This is one from a company called Sabersmith. Again, a sword company that makes knives, but they make odd swords too and odd knives to boot.
I love daggers. I've always loved daggers. I will always love daggers. I like the look of them. There you go. Is that
I
a
don't
cold
know.
steel?
Yeah, this is the Shanghai Shadow.
That's an
Maybe they
old one,
changed the
isn't
name.
it?
Yeah, it's only a little racist.
Well, a little racism never hurt anybody.
But yeah, I don't know why I have this. Because it's not a knife. This is one of those things that was added into a box, I'm sure, that I got because I have two of them. And this is not a style of knife that I enjoy at all. This is the dumb. It'd be great. This is a knife that must be for throwing because when I pick it up, I just want to throw it.
Well, you should. As much as you threw the dagger, yeah. When I watched that video, I said, "Yeah, I'm okay. It ain't gonna break. You've thrown it 100 times."
How about this? How about this chunky monkey?
Oh yeah, those the drop fours. Matter of fact, I see your drop forge, and I match it with my drop forge push dagger from
Oh
Cold
God,
Steel.
this is the dumbest fucking knife ever. I hate it so much.
How did you acquire that?
Same thing. A lot of the knives that I have, I've ended up with, as fodder in trades for swords where haggling back and forth and we just can't quite get a deal and somebody says like, I got this knife I'll throw in. And um, so I've incidentally come to find that this drop forge technique, the integral handle, is not always bad. There have been some sort. This knife made me think the whole style of making this was the dumbest possible way to make a knife. Um, but I've had a couple swords that were made in a similar style that actually delighted me, that were both historic and felt really good. There's a company called Hanwei. They don't make it anymore, but it's uh, is it a Chijian? I think is what it's called. Anyway, there's a Jian that is made where the handle is integral, and so more or less the handle is, you know, basically like this underneath the wrapping, where it's made out of one piece of steel, and it feels fantastic. But this knife does not. It's awful. It's so dumb. And if you live in a cold weather state, it freezes to your hands, so you can't put it down. Like even though I don't feel like throwing it, I feel like throwing it in the garbage maybe. Um, this freezes to my hands. That's one of the reasons I really hate it. Is if I try to use
Well,
this where I live, it will stick to my hands.
it wouldn't roll in your hand. That's why you like the buck. I thought that would
It
be.
it kind of would though. Like it's very
Well,
narrow in profile here. So
I've
when I
dropped the
hold it,
one. Where's the? Oh, that's what I was going to ask you about this before we go. That is one question. Listen, one question I had about this being in a cold weather state,
Mhm.
did this bother you? The exposed.
um, yes and no. So can you feel it? Yes.
Oh,
You
you
do
do.
feel you do feel the tang if you're holding it in your bare hands, but because it's only exposed a little bit and that rubber stuff doesn't hold much, it doesn't it insulates pretty well, I guess is the right way to put it. So if I close my hand around it and I'm not wearing a glove, my hand isn't cold. It doesn't retain the temperature so much. So I could feel the cold tang, but because it's only a pretty small part of the knife, it didn't bother me like this did, and it didn't stick to my hand. This will, if I use it barehanded when it's 20 below outside, it will stick in my hand, and I won't be able to let it go. I'll have to go. It'll freeze to my skin.
Well, here's what you need to do. You need to make a video and title it "The Dumbest Knife Ever" and show that knife. If you think you've had hate before, if you thought the ass cancer wish was bad, go online and say something bad about Cold Steel or the Buckaroos here, and they will come for your head.
The Buckaroo, they're coming to fuck with you.
Oh, I love the Buckaroo. What the hell? Oh, I got one of those. I don't have
So
one with a button on it.
it
Is that a
it
button?
lock. Yeah, this is it's a diving knife.
Guy's knife.
Yep, and this little button you push in so you can, I don't know, it secures it
Okay.
in there, and you can price it with it, and yeah.
Like you're supposed to with a knife. That is paramount. That's the first thing you've got to do. If you're going to start reviewing more knives, you've got to price it with them. That's a big thing.
I didn't actually mind this one. This Northwest
Another cold
Ranger.
steel. Is that a cold
No,
steel?
it's a SOG. So,
Okay.
but I like little fixed bladey things.
Handle
Bags of
McHandle thing.
knives. Ah,
What company do you feel produces the best multifunctional knives? Like there's a few tools in it. Oh, that's a tough one. Todd Carr. I'm a big Victorinox fan. Is that what you mean? The Swiss Army stuff, and I wasn't. Do you have a Swiss Army knife, Matt?
yeah, yeah.
I
I
and I,
probably have oodles of them in this bag.
I got one in my pocket. I started. There's a guy, Chris Hall. I went camping last October, and that's when I about cut this finger off. Ooh, I like that. I started. He gave me this, and I started carrying a Swiss Army knife. I think I got three. Now, see, that's more my EDC size. There, be a good sandwich cutter.
Would you like me to butter your bread?
I'll take it to Jimmy John's with me. What is that?
This is an antique Tonto.
See, that's what I thought you were going to send when you said my EDC. I thought I was going to get something cool, something not.
No, nobody carries a Tonto like this around as an EDC scab. That's not a thing people do.
I wouldn't
Or
say
that,
nobody. I,
yeah, that's fair. This is another one.
that's dope. So now, is that a traditional Tonto? Would that be considered a Tonto?
I think the name is uh, Yoridori, an armor piercer. Um, so you would have samurai armor, right? And it covers your face and kind of goes down over your shoulders, and then it has this mask, and then a little bit that covers your neck, like a little flap that dangles there. So this would, you get it on the chest and try to slide it up under there to get at the throat, and that's one of the ways that that people would stab with these things is get up and under your armor plates, I guess. Anyway, yeah, this is a and this one's a modern reproduction rather than
Okay.
an antique, but this is a tanto, and it's in a shirasai, a simple wooden scabbard.
Now, is that what would have been carried? Something like that?
No, this is for storage. So this is an antique right here, and I'm not sure. I would guess probably Edo period somewhere in there. So 1700s somewhere
Okay.
would be my guess. Um, anyway, the uh, scabbard is not lacquered. It's made out of I think magnolia wood. I think is what it
Okay.
is, and it's left unlacquered and undone to store the blade so that water can not gather on the blade. It can move through the wood basically, but it's also protected. And if you get it wet, it's not going to get like rained on and stuff. But anyway, these are for storage. They're not for use. And all this scabbard, this style that you see here, is, I mean, basically there's rice glue holding these two panels, these two scales, for lack of a better word, but it's obviously an enclosed tang. This little peg right here is the only thing that's keeping the sword together. So if I take this out, then the tang becomes immediately available to see. So there's the
Okay.
tang of the knife. But you wouldn't want to use this because all this is two slabs of wood glued together with a little peg sticking in the middle. So if you start going to town, you're gonna rip it apart. Like it's not gonna survive very long.
Okay. So they
So
would
this
have
is
had
only
different.
for storage.
Okay. So they would have put a different handle on
Yep.
it.
And
Okay.
then when they were done with it and they wanted to store it, they'd put it in something like this. And
Very
then
cool.
swanky bitches like me put it in a little bag to make ourselves feel special too.
Now that's not in your knife bag, right?
No, no, I do have things that are not in the knife bag. Let's see what other crap I have here, since showing part seems interesting. Um, I'm not sure exactly what this is. I think it's from a custom knife maker in Minnesota. Uh, a friend of mine. I'm old enough to have friends I haven't talked to for 20 years, Scab. And there's this friend of mine that I hadn't seen for 20 years. And last time that like I was really talking with him a lot was when I was getting married and I'd invited him to my wedding. But then, I got married really young, moving around, gallivanting around, life happens, and I hadn't talked to him for 20 years. And he called me out of the blue and was like, "Hey, do you want to have a beer?" And I said, "Sure, come on over and we'll catch up." So he came over to my house, we had a beer, we talked about what the last 20 years had brought. My wife said, "Why didn't he talk to you for 20 years?" And I was like, I don't know, it didn't come up. But along the way, he brought this. He brought a wedding present, and so he's like, "Do you still like knives?" And so he's like, "There's a knife maker up north that makes these." So he brought me a wedding present after 20 years because he missed my wedding, which I thought was hilarious.
Well, that was awesome.
Yeah, I don't know what the hell this thing is.
It looks a little bit like an Almar.
Casper says
What?
Casper.
Oh,
Crawford Casper. CRKT, I guess.
okay. EDC
I
for phone. What's going on?
I don't like it at all.
Good,
Not sure why I
good.
have this. This is one that I actually wore around a little bit. This is the spew from CRKT.
Yeah, I like that. I like
It's
that.
got a
It's
it's got a
stabby.
little horizontal carry case. You can move it around, but I tend to do horizontal carry, so I could stick it on my
That's what I
belt
was going
over
to
the.
ask. You do more scout carry,
Is that what that's called?
horizontal scout, whatever.
Yep,
You like that better?
I tend to. Yeah, just because I if I have anything on the side of me, it always seems to get caught when I sit down or move around, right? So the only place that I don't stab myself or that it doesn't catch on something or that I can get at it quickly is under my gut, right? So like basically on my belt buckle, I can access it easy with my hands. If I bend over, it doesn't poke me. If I sit down, it doesn't catch on things. Um, so I tend to prefer that carry. I don't know. This is a very poorly made custom something something.
You know, you don't we don't just throw custom on gas station knives and things. You know that, right?
Yeah, this is supposed to be some sort of handmade knife that I got in, I can't remember, another sword trade, but it feels like made in Pakistan
Yeah,
type thing.
yeah. It was
And
probably custom made, not here. Yeah, yeah. But it looks
here's
nice.
another one. I think I carried this one for a while and didn't like it.
Who makes that one?
SOG,
Sock.
the Trident Tonto.
Okay.
Do you say SOG or SOG?
I don't know. I say SOG. I think out of convenience, but I think it's SOG. I think that's the correct way. I have a damn it. I've got the one that they made in the USA. It says 35 in. I actually like it by SOG, SOG, whatever. Thank you, Brock. Appreciate you, buddy.
I thought I'd like this, did not.
Now, which is that? The cold steel?
Tough
What
Light,
is, yeah,
Cold
the
Steel.
cold. Yeah.
It's
So
like
why don't you like it?
um, I don't know, doesn't fit in my hand. I don't ever quite feel in control of it. Feels like I'm gonna slip, even though I'm holding it tight. It feels like I'm gonna lose it and end up on the serrations.
Yeah, and they do wicked, wicked serrations. Cold Steel does some
Yeah,
sharp serrations.
and
Rebel, what's
like
up?
these little things here, I always think that like when there's a little small knife like this, I feel like okay, well I can open boxes and I can be fidgety with it and I can do the little fidgety things I want to do. Um, and in terms of like pocket knife, I open boxes, I pick my fingernails, I do
Yeah,
those kind of things with it. Nothing particularly special, but I also fix little sword related things or scrape and whatnot. So I do a lot of like little fidgety things with knives. And when I hold a knife like this, I want to feel like if I'm really leaning into something, I have complete control with it and it's not going to slip or turn in my hands. This one doesn't feel like it's going to turn, but I don't feel like I really am in control of it. It's just awkward shaped and oddly that where's that little spew thing? This thing, despite the fact that it has a derpy handle that doesn't have the same finger wells, when I hold this, I feel like it's not going anywhere. I'm not going to slide up the blade. I feel like I can put this point wherever I need it to, that I'm in control of the weapon, even though I have less kind of meat on it. It feels like it's not going to go anywhere. Lots
well,
of
control's
knives.
the biggest thing.
There's a whole bunch of little stupid mil spec. Don't know. These probably gas station knives. This is another one though that this is a CRKT minimalist. This is another one that it's basically all the things that that cold steel one was, except I can actually, it fits in my hand and I can do all
Yeah,
those little fidgety things with it. This one really locks in despite being, more or less nothing. But I do like the way this little one feels.
yeah. Well, that one, that a lot of folks uh carry that. What am I even seeing today? Well, I've got my. I just showed. I've got. Let's see. I just opened that in my pocket. That wasn't good. So I've got this. Somebody asked what I was EDCing. I've got this. I've got this. I'm doing more pocket fixed blades today. Ooh, I like that.
This is a
More,
Dirk.
yeah, I like that. I like the stabby.
Can be. This,
So I'm doing 2 pocket fixed blades and a Swiss Army knife. This one, I like this one. This one might be, this is the nymph, and I just found it today. This is what I was going to say. I just found this some bitch. I opened the box. I was looking for something. I had this. I had my Emerson CQC 8. This one you might like, but
it
you
looks up
almost
my alley.
but you almost have to feel it in hand to appreciate it. Ooh, I like that. Is that another Tonto?
Hmm.
See, I like that a lot.
This is a Tonto by Anthony DiCristofano, and it's a, what do they call it? Uh,
Move it.
Osuraku. I try not to talk over it because it costs a lot of money to make it shiny. So if I spittle on it, that's why,
I
force of
got it.
habit. I move it out of the
I
way
got
when I talk, so I don't talk to it.
That's dope, man. I like that a lot.
It has this line here where the point starts here, so there's this big tip on it.
That's clean, man. I like the lines on that a lot. I like that a lot.
It'll be
Rebel,
nice when it's done. It'll be a real looker.
how far out are you?
Um, I don't know. Probably a couple years from getting it done. It'll be a clean, nice looking little one. This is technically, I guess, a knife. It's a Wakizashi, but
So what differentiates between a Wakizashi and a Tonto? Explain that.
size. So basically 12 inches and under. One shaku, which is about a foot, ballpark. It's a little different, but call it a foot. Is where that and under is going to be a Tonto. 2 to 1 is a Wakizashi, so basically about 2 feet, 24 inches of blade. Blade measured from this little notch right here to the tip, that measurement of 24 inches and under, meaning that this collar piece isn't included. A lot of people measure
Okay.
from
Okay.
the cross guard, but the blade is actually measured from this little tab on the spine right here. Um,
Now
so
is that also the cutting edge?
it's about, they're supposed to be in about the same spot, but they aren't always. But you measure
Okay.
from the mune mache, this back notch right here,
Okay.
is how you would describe the blade length is measured from the tip to this little nub on the back. Um, and then over 2 to 3 is usually a katana. So that's a ballpark, and then over that you start getting into or O katana or something else entirely.
That's wicked, man.
This is made by a guy named Bob Ignath, who has passed away. He passed away some time ago, but he was one of the early American smiths to start making Japanese style blades. And he used to make them and sell them at like gun shows and stuff like that, and sell them for pretty cheap. Where something like this would probably, cost you a couple $100 or something like that. But nowadays, like something like this is a few $1,000s
Yeah.
because one, there's nobody that makes them for a couple $100s anymore. But
Yeah.
but the
Well,
guy making them is also passed. So
yeah. Well, I mean, everything changes, but how much would that one be worth?
I would guess that this is probably $3,500 to $4,000 in its current state. When it's done up, depending on what level it gets done up at, it could be, at a up from there.
Now, Jeremy asks, do you have any Walter Sorrells blades? And Geronimo, welcome in, buddy.
I don't anymore. I had a folded Damascus. Well, basically his bloomery steel. So the steel that Walter makes himself from iron sand. I had a katana that was made from that, and I sold it earlier this year, so I don't have any more Walter Sorrells blades. But I've had a couple Wakizashi from him, and I think a couple katana from him, and they are good. So if you're wondering if he does a good job, I can say he certainly does. He's very competent.
Now, I was asked, how would that do against a 4x4?
Well, it depends on what you do with that 4x4. Uh, if you are trying to cut the 4x4 in half, it will, right? You can do it, but there will be consequences for doing it. And it will also depend on with what kind of tenacity and aim you hit that 4x4. So if I assume that you have the most fragile Walter Sorrells blade, right? Probably something made from his bloomery steel that maybe he didn't nail the heat treat on. And you are a mediocre swordsman, as in you're gonna cut this way, but you're gonna have your blade held this way, right? You're gonna kind of slap some things every now and again. Your sword is gonna get fucked up. Okay, it's gonna bend. It's the first time you whack that 4x4, you're gonna hit the 4x4 post. But if you come in at the wrong angle, then your sword is gonna kind of wrap around it. Walter typically differentially heat treats blades,
Mhm.
and it's not a criticism of the way he does it, but just differentially hardened blades. They'll take a set easier than through hardened blades will, and that is very likely to cause a problem if you have bad form and you're hitting a 4x4. However, if your form is not bad and you're not swinging so hard that the blade like recurves, then enough, medium kind of cuts at a proper angle, and you can cut through the 4x4 and not notice it on the sword so much. You probably have some scratches, but that would be about the extent of it. It just depends on your skill, the blade, and and all of those things. But I would say that would be a recipe to lose money. Would
Yeah.
would be my default. Walter Sorrell's
Uh,
blades are probably 5 grand to get a katana
yeah.
out of him to start. On the low end, um, I wouldn't try it on a 4x4. That would not be advice I would give.
Okay, so I was asked, I'm trying to catch some of these comments because these guys are more with us. What are your thoughts on, and we might have discussed this on Blade Talk with Joe, Paul Chen Hanwei swords? And that's a broad topic,
Sure.
but
It,
thank you for that.
saying what do you think of Hanwei swords is like saying what do you think of Ford? You know,
Okay,
do they
okay.
make a good whatever? Well, they make everything, right? I
Yeah, I
mean,
got one of the
I mean,
battle axes.
yeah. Like if you want Hanwei, um, or more broadly, the Cass Iberia distributor has a number of everything. They make effectively all the different things. Generally speaking, I think highly of them, and they are the standard by which I judge other sword companies. But
Really?
that is to say that they do a um, generally a very serviceable job on the products. Some of them are better than others, though, and so just have to look out for that. There's some I have not been thrilled with, but others that I've been enamored with. And one of my favorite swords, my favorite sword, if you say what's my favorite, it's a Hanwei bamboo mat. I've had very,
Really?
very expensive swords, but the one that I like the most is that one. However, you won't ever get the same one that I have. They're all a little different. Mine's a bit of an odd one, but still, my favorite sword is a Hanwei.
That's cool. I'm not poking you. I messed up on the comments. The now when you were at, he wouldn't get far flowers and thorns. But well, here's the other side. Matthew does the same thing. Matthew breaks swords. So which I've found fascinating. So it just depends. I think a lot of this depends on. There's a lot of knives, and we'll talk about this. We'll touch on this, but there's a lot of knives, and a lot of times I'll get comments about Joe X, and I love Joe. I really do. He's a good dude. He's been good to me. But I think where people miss on that sometimes uh, is you and Joe set out to break the thing. right? That's the end game. That's the goal. That's the prize. Whereas if something breaks on my channel, that's a problem. You know, like when the buck shattered and all the buckaroos fell apart. Um, how did you kind of
Yeah.
go into that? How did you go? Okay, I want to break swords.
Well, you kind of touched on something and then
I'll
moved
do
to
that.
something else.
I'll
So
do that.
two school of thoughts here. One is breaking things. Is the intention of breaking things, does that mean that like other, how does that play into a video, a review? How should you take that as a person watching? Um,
Flag.
and then second is uh, is the later part of that question. How did I get into it? So I'll address the second part first. How did I get into it? I liked swords. I thought I saw other people break them, and I always thought it'd be kind of cool. Historically, there's been sword feats and breaking that have happened, and it's always been a thing that I thought would be neat. As a swordsman, as a person that uses a tool, it's fun to think of like what happens if I push it, right? If you like shooting firearms, like what happens if I shoot all the big ammo really fast? Does the gun like there's I don't know. It's a novelty kind of thing, but I thought it'd be fun. I thought it'd be entertaining, and I thought it might teach me something. And I thought along the way it might be useful. So Ronin Katana was the first company that sent me a sword to review. It was after I had asked them to send me something. I had collected swords, and Ronin had asked me for some feedback on a higher end product that I had purchased from them as a collector. It took me a long time to get that feedback back, and when I did, I used the opportunity to basically like do a school project. I was
Yeah.
finishing university, so I did this like market analysis, and I sent 40 pages of feedback to Ronin Katana.
Oh
That was like
boy.
a larger market analysis with graphs and charts and data and stuff. And he was happy about it. The owner was, and said, "Let me send you a sword." And I said, I'd rather break one, and do that. And that kind of started off. And Ronin Katana was and still is, you know, a friend of the channel, so to speak. They're a vendor, so I, have to be objective about it. But they were the first ones that gave me a sword to review, and they were very generous with other products for me to review and push and break. So that's how I started, and then I put it on the internet, and it kept going, and here I am today. But the first part of that was, does that intent matter, right? Because you said if a buck breaks on your channel, it's a problem. If it breaks on
Yeah.
Joe X's problem, that was the intent. And so, yes, that intent does matter. To put it bluntly, like if you are trying to break a thing and achieve that aim, yeah, you're striking differently, you're hitting things harder, you're like the innocuous things that you don't see are probably done to a greater degree because failure is the goal rather
Mhm.
than something that you would avoid. However, I think Joe and myself both do this kind of like normal use side of things first. Like, does it do the things that you would normally expect it to do? And so if a sword has issues prior to when it should fail, then I think that's still useful information. So in your case, you're batoning and it breaks. Well, if it broke batoning with Joe, he might baton harder because he doesn't give a shit if it breaks. But fundamentally, it still broke batoning, right? If you've also had a couple drinks and you're out there chopping firewood, you might be hitting that thing with a baton a little harder. You might grab a metal bar and not think anything else of it. I don't know. You might do some dumb shit with your knife. And so if it fundamentally breaks batoning, whether it's with you, who's not trying to break it, or Joe, who doesn't give a fuck if it breaks, it broke batoning, right? And I think like you can say like that's a problem either way. In my case, I use pool noodles, water bottles, things like that. Well, if I have problems cutting pool noodles or water bottles, generally that's going to be a problem. Oh, did I
Are you
lose you?
there? No, I'm here. Are you there?
Yep. Oh, I lost your mic. My
Can you hear
I
me
hear
now?
myself talking.
Can you hear me? It
Yeah.
must have started us over. I guess you start over at a certain point. This is our first time in the vertical. Real quick, Swags. I've got the walleye. I love it, babe.
Your
I'm
your
curious.
audio
I've
sounds
seen.
different.
Does it?
Yeah, I think you lost your mic.
I may have. Let me see. Come on. Can you hear me now?
Yeah, I can hear you. It just sounds like it's coming through your phone instead of your
Okay. Well, it's weird. Thank you, Flowers and Thorns. I can hear you both. Good from viewer end. Sweet. All right. Okay, hold on. Let's try this. Is that better? Can you hear me at all?
I can hear you. Other people are saying they can't though.
How about now? Because I unplugged the mic. Let me try this again. Give me 1 second, guys. I'm sorry I didn't realize. All right, try me now. Joe, talk to me, Bubba. Is this better? Guys, somebody say something. Okay. It okay, cool. Thanks, guys. Richard, appreciate you, buddy. I love the way Jeremy. All right, there we go. Okay. We probably won't go much longer, guys. I appreciate you. Uh it must have reset. Now, is that a walkie?
Yep.
How many
Yeah, I
walkies do
think
we
you're
have?
uh 15-ish.
Really?
Yes. Yes, I have a few different walkies. Walkies are fun. Ooh, I'm hearing myself talk back out of your speakers. Chat, are you guys hearing the
All right.
echo?
I keep getting your back. How about now? Y'all give me a second. Give me 1 second. Matthew, show something. And let me swap
Look
microphones.
what I can do. All right, I will regale you all with the story of this Wakizashi. This is a cable Wakizashi from a gentleman by the name of Chris Knudsen. He does some designing for Spyderco, as I understand it. And over COVID, apparently he liked the videos I made and said, "Hey, I made a Wakizashi. Do you want it?" And I said, "Yes, sir. Yes, sir, I do." And I really liked it because he is a very competent smith and it's a lovely Wakizashi, but also because it was made for me. And it's a touching gesture when somebody says, "I've dedicated an enormous amount of my time to making you a thing." So I finished it up. These are fittings from a place called Hyper Cafe. It was done up with this neat wrap and done in a theme that I like, and it came out to be a smart little walkie.
How about now?
Sounds the same, Skip.
Well, we're gonna go with it. Y'all just act
Woo!
like it sounds good, and we'll run it to the end. We've gone. Let's see. Let me try to catch up. Kyle, nobody likes you, and your mother ain't shit. Appreciate you. How about that? So here's the other thing, and we'll wrap this thing up. Appreciate y'all. Love you. Matthew, would you join Joe and I on a Blade Talk
It
coming up
would
soon?
be my pleasure, sir.
We would love to do it. All right. Love y'all. Let's call it a night. Thank you for bearing with us. Sorry about the audio. Um, we'll catch you later. Thank you for being on, brother.
Cheers. Thanks for having
Check it
me.
out. Love y'all.